And I think that's where most of us fall short. We're afraid to be that kind of vulnerable. We're afraid to get ourselves in a position where we're not in control and we don't know. And again, it gets back to that initial leap into the void. Having done that once, the gift of that was creating a friendship with the emptiness itself. So in jumping into my worst fear, which was a loss of my identity as an artist, without a doubt, to jump into that and to find renewal, to find such beauty and such inspiration and the ability to survive it against all odds, that has become the template for my way of being in the world. It's like whenever I see that void, even though I'm still shaking in my boots, I know it's the source. I know it's there. I know there's something in it that will give me what I need, even though I don't know what it is or how to get it at that moment. I know it's there. The Christian idea of eternity, until you die and are reborn, you don't experience eternal life. Eternity is the ability to face death over and over again. And it could be the death of, like I said, a moment of helping someone. I don't know how to help this person. I don't know what to do. But in that unknowing, in entering that death and trusting it, having done it once, the promise happened there. And so it almost becomes automatic. You have to let the gods know you mean business one good time. And I think the promise of eternity is the promise that whenever you're up against another death, another limitation where all is lost, you can trust it like you did in the beginning. And the promise of a response from the universe will come through at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Then another question or thought that I was thinking as I was reading your book and finished with it is, again, one of the things that came up was an unconditional trust into inspiration. And it seems like there's almost two trains of thought in spiritual transformation or motivational literature and books out there today. One seems like go after your dreams and create the life you want. And then there's another line of thinking that says, no, you really should just serve a higher purpose or surrender and give yourself over to a higher purpose. How do you balance, or how would you suggest balancing your own personal desires, hopes, dreams versus surrendering or serving a higher purpose?
It's a very good question, because I think there's a tendency on the kind of in New Age thinking that, you have to be like a boat without a rudder at some level. And I think you have to be fierce about your personal dream. I often said about my life as an artist, if I could have painted my way to heaven, I would have done it because I tried hard enough. And at some level, you have to give it your all. You've got to cultivate your discipline, whatever it is. If you want to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, you have to become the best that you can be at your discipline. You have to cultivate. You have to work very hard. You have to do everything in your power to be the most conscious, beautiful person on the planet. And you're going to fail. And as Yogananda says, to die along the way is to succeed. It's only when we've done our very, very best and we've worked it to the bone that we know we can't do anymore. If you haven't done your best, it's like, how could you possibly feel good about being at the place where nothing is working? Because if you're there, you're going to feel it's not working because I haven't done very much. I sat here surrendered, looking at my navel. I think there's a ferocity that has to be in place. Ramakrishna tells a story about a man who goes to the guru and says, how do I find God? How do I find God? And he keeps sending away. Finally, the man, annoys him so much that Ramakrishna takes his head and puts it under the water. And the man comes up gasping for air. He says, when you want God as bad as you want air, you will find God. And that's how a dream has to be. You have to want what you want for the good of everything most beautiful. It can't be for stinky little selfish reasons. You have to want what you want with all of your heart and soul and put everything into it. And then you're going to fail, and then give yourself even to that failure, and that's where transformation comes in.
So you would say, if I'm hearing this correctly, like your dreams and your hopes and your desires, those are almost like sacred inspirations in your heart, and you should act upon that calling and go after that. But then after you have done all you can, given it your best, and run that to its fruition, then at that point, and along the way, you can also call upon like a higher power and surrender, and or after you've given it all you've given.
Well, and you can't be attached to your efforts. I think when we're attached to our efforts and we start to think we deserve something because of it, and I think we can't be attached to the form. Like for me, I was very attached to my form as an artist, as a painter in the studio with lots of paintings. You know, I was attached to that form, but the quest for inspiration took me to a place outside of that. So you can't be attached to the past. It's almost like, well, this is where creation has taken me. What I'm saying is it will take you to territory that you are not familiar with, you don't know about. It's like a quantum leap. You know, your efforts will only get you up to a certain level. It's the level of knowing. And if you stay there, you'll die of boredom because you'll have to dig in. You'll have to give in to your fears and not go any further. But at that place, you're going to have to trust something larger. And that something larger, it jumps over the gap of knowing and takes you to territory that you can't imagine. I never would have imagined that being such a driven artist and creating such a huge body of work and having film made about my art and life, that at the height of that accomplishment, that I would make an about face and give it all up. I never would have imagined that. And I never would have imagined that doing so would be my ultimate expression as an artist and a human being on the planet. But it has been.
And you're still making art right now. Like, you started making art after your journey, correct?
Not for many years. When I gave up art, I thought I would never go back. But I got to the place where it no longer mattered. I wasn't attached to it. I was very good at it. And now I have another huge body of work, and I'm completely detached from the process. It's been incorporated into the totality in a different kind of way.
And that's what I was going to ask, is maybe how is the creation of your art different now than it was when you were in your 20s, before your journey?
When I was in my 20s, I was the one doing the doing. It was all will, intelligence, and good intentions, to the best of my ability. And, you know, and that's what failed. You can't get there from here. It's not the way. So how it's different now is it's in conversation with all other aspects of my life. I get up in the morning, get a phone call, and there's something stirring that piques my interest. I go out into the world and I find an item that fits into place. And the next thing I know, I'm creating something that's related to everything else going on in my life. And so there's a totality to the experience. It's not separate. I think earlier it was almost pathological. But that's the best you can do with what you have available as a young person. You can only be pathological. You can only do what you do and think you're the doer. You see this at all levels. I mean, I'm working with people who are hugely successful financially in every other way. And what I see is that the moment they turn and say, what a good boy am I, look what I've accomplished, their life comes undone. So that's not necessarily accomplishment. Even if they are able to save all their pennies and do what they do, you know, you come up against a place where you as the controller will fail. And that in that failure is your success. You know, it's a kind of necessary holy defeat. It's written into all spiritual traditions. You know, it's the Buddha before enlightenment when he was going to either die of starvation or get enlightened. It's Christ before the cross. It's in all traditions, the place where you come up against that metaphoric death, and you may die here. You may not survive this moment. But what you find is if you can give yourself to it, there's where your life begins. And most of us don't. That's a simple fact. Most of us come with our efforts and we stay there and we dig in. It's like we play our little chess game with death and we ultimately lose.
Well, this has just been fascinating conversation, and I appreciate your thoughts. Do you have any closing remarks, advice, or lessons or suggestions you'd like to leave our listeners with?
For me, it always comes down to the asking, the gentleness of the universe. I think it takes a lot for all of us. If any of us are going to live our full potential, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But it basically comes down to something very simple, which is a humble conversation, a humble asking.
What do you ask for?
What do we basically want? We want love in the world. We want to do something good with our life. We want to be of service to our world. I mean, this is what most of us want. We get lost in the details sometimes, you know, money for its own sake or art for its own sake. But basically, I mean, how do you ask how to be the most beautiful human being possible and channel that which most wants to come into the world as a creative expression? I mean, we can word it any way we want to, but if the intent is high and we're doing the asking, and then have the courage to know we don't know how to get there. I mean, anybody who thinks they know where they're going is in trouble.
Yeah, it's like we make plans and God laughs. Well, I would really encourage people to visit Jerry's website, handsofalchemy.com. There's a lot of great interviews. You can see his art. You can find out more about his book, The Inspired Heart.